Good afternoon or good morning or evening, wherever you're located. So yes, my name is Nicole Anderson and I am managing partner of an entity based between London and actually Cape Town called Redsand. Just a little bit about Redsand contextually. We call ourselves a venture builder focused on predominantly financial services technology, and by virtue of the business model that is typically associated with incubation, we really look at building businesses entirely through a process, our own innovation methodology applied to a full shared services model. We look to fund ventures and take them to market. So our history has been for the last 8 years doing exactly this across multiple disciplines, across a spectrum of financial services innovation areas. So some of those are mentioned on this particular slide. And we've really worked pretty much globally in our scope of work. We are very much borderless in our aspiration and the client mandates we take on. So today's, let me just ensure that there's no interference with the screen, I'm hoping, because can everyone see? Can you just let me know that there's no interference with the screen and you can see that perfectly?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. So I was asked to position some of the trends, the PropTech trends that I've come across or that I'm involved in terms of use cases. And I have a specific slant which I'd like to walk the participants through today. And this is predominantly focused on the area of sustainability. And I think there's a lot of talk around sustainability and what sustainable green mandates across the construction industry mean. But I'm going to come at this from really the perspective of where the building industry, the property industry, and its associated incision points into technology have a very important role to play in the future of our planet. So for those who are not involved in the area of green finance or green tech, I'm going to spend a little bit of time contextually, and for those who are, well, this is probably all very, known data points for you. But the kind of major platform for driving change in a critical decade, this is the one we are about to enter in just over, in less than a month, is really to attain the drivers associated with the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement's main pivotal stance is that the globe, from an industrial perspective, which flows down across a number of different value chains, has to maintain this climatic genocide, prevent this climatic genocide, which is anything above a 1.5 degree to 2 degree temperature change is essentially disastrous for our planet. And so across the traditional industrial third generation economics or economic models of the world, there is a lot of pressure points for businesses to actually begin to evolve how they operate and use raw materials, and certainly how they emit whatever they emit, whether it's chemicals or gases or heat, into the atmosphere in a far more conditioned way, if at all. And I think what many don't know is that the construction industry is a major, major contributor to climate change and the pressure on our planet. The construction industry as a whole contributes to 55% of all global emissions. And it's there or thereabouts the same, about 50%, same consumer of total electricity supply. And there's no wonder. I mean, this is, it's a very large industry. It's very capital intensive, a lot of machinery. But as buildings become more and more sophisticated, the role of technology and the role of embedded technology in buildings is also a contributing factor. There is also an interesting anecdote that when you begin to look at aspects like the data supply to buildings, and you look at the data center industry as a whole, that takes the whole, intersection of data services into buildings to another stratospheric level in terms of concern, because data centers are incredibly damaging. Traditional data centers are incredibly damaging to the atmosphere. The heat emission is a major concern. And so my work in Scandinavia in the PropTech space, as you could call it that, it's been looking at the convergence of construction and renewable energy sources for real estate, and how that can be mitigated. So that's the construct I'm coming from. And of course, property and construction is a growing industry. If we continue the way we're continuing globally, essentially we will be adding the land mass of Japan to the planet every single year for the next 20 years. And that is a huge concern. So there's all of this, green agenda associated with the property industry. And then you have another real challenge for the industry itself, which is property and property investment is a very challenging, issue. It is for those participants in construction and property development, the ways in which funding is raised, with whatever part of the financial value chain you're looking at, is generally quite sticky. Investing in property is fairly opaque. It is an illiquid asset. And historically, while it's been an attractive asset class to invest in, it actually costs a lot of money to participate in the property market, whether you're a retail investor or an institutional investor. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to work on a couple of projects to actually look at how, number one, I could support the industry, so to speak, in terms of creating more awareness for sustainable property and sustainable real estate and the associated capital intensive sub-industries associated with construction, but also alleviate some of the challenges associated through innovative technology solutions for property investing, and how property investing and the scrutiny associated with sustainable property could actually add value to investors, irrespective of the size of their wallet. And so the lens that this particular use case comes from or looks through encapsulates all of these areas, which are really quite important trends in and of themselves. So I've touched on sustainability, looking at this increasing digitization associated with the construction industry as a whole and the finished product in terms of the bricks and mortar created, and how it's not just about bricks and mortar and cement, it's very much about the technology infused into property and how they can be an aid to participants, occupants, and investors alike. But also, how property development inefficiencies and supply chain can be alleviated through interesting technology advancements. And probably no surprise, one of the biggest areas that is relevant from a technology trend perspective to touch and address almost all of these challenges is blockchain technology. I've been, and my team have been very much involved in blockchain business models for the last 2 to 3 years. And certainly the PropTech space is a perfect use case for where blockchain can be used to create transparency, to create far less friction in value chains, whether they're physical or financial, to create the necessary alleviation, therefore, of cost in financial and physical value chains. And so much of what I say today is predicated on how blockchain can be applied to these challenges. So enter a project. This project is codenamed Glacia, so it's not the real entity. So if you Google this, you'll struggle to find a company called Glacia. But this is a use case we've been building and is going to be launched into 2020. The idea was, well, what could we do to actually touch and resolve and address some of those challenges I touched on earlier through a very different lens? And the idea was, well, if you could solve capital flows into capital-intensive industries such as real estate in a sustainable way, that has got to be pretty good news for everyone. And the capital markets have and are still, I would argue, the last bastion for change when it comes to innovation. The fintech revolution, evolution, depending on your viewpoint, over the last decade has been very much, a retail-centric, up the value chain movement, right? Whether it's consumers being dissatisfied with their banking products or fees or transparency or financial inclusion, has always been kind of focused on the retail market. But with sustainability and capital associated with big capital-intensive industries such as construction, it's the capital markets that are going to come under increasing pressure. There's a lot of talk, and I'll touch on it very shortly, about what do the big fund managers have to do in order to address the capital vacuum, in order to move our entire planet to a global low carbon economy. So that's the challenge we looked at. And we have a project in the works which is really looking at a digital investment platform and mechanism which really brings together the ability to finance projects, green projects and real estate projects predominantly, in a far more efficient way. It looks to aid those funds that are focused on impact, whether it be social or environmental, with greater service levels, with greater scrutiny. It also looks to combine and collapse the role, or the participation, I should say, of the retail investors into an asset class such as real estate, which has been quite difficult and opaque for many, and costly for many to participate in, and to really aid some very viable projects. Those companies, real estate developers, construction companies that are evolving their models to be far more greener, far more sustainable. But actually, because they may be mid-tier companies or growing companies, are not necessarily large listed entities, and therefore are kind of off the radar. They are private market, growth industry companies that find it very difficult to find capital in cost-efficient ways. So the challenge overlaid with the original challenge of the industry as a whole that we tried to solve was really, could we provide the fund management industry greater transparency of where their money could be deployed, and therefore that would help them unlocking more capital because they would satisfy growing regulatory scrutiny of green projects. And if we could do that, that meant there'd be more capital going into the better projects or projects that were viable and verifiable. And actually, we could, over time, and we've done this in one of our use cases in Norway, actually combine the access points for people like you and I who really do want to do good things with our discretionary income, do want to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, but also value the asset class or the investment structures that property offer us. So Glacia does exactly this. Glacia looks at as an investment management platform for fund managers. It helps fund managers provide the authorities and stakeholders the necessary transparency that is required of them. And the way in which this is done is predominantly served by a blockchain engine, which links, if not drives, much of the supply chain of the projects that underpin their portfolios. It allows retail investors as much transparency in the projects that their funds of choice would be investing in, or even better, the ability to directly invest in property. So really taking away the division between what professional, accredited, or institutional investors have as visibility. And so, putting the power back into the consumer's hands in terms of where they can actually take action and still wealth create at the same time. And then the final thing is really creating true value for those projects that are in the process of fundraising, right? So essentially creating a marketplace so that property developers and those that are involved in the construction process have the ability to unlock value for themselves. And the way we've done this and the way we're applying ourselves to the challenge is actually providing greater efficiencies in the supply chain using blockchain. And a very simple extraction of this would be how you can apply smart contract logic to budget and time-bound delivery to tasks associated with any construction or supply chain requirement. And so just by simply using the blockchain smart contract logic to automatically verify based on a codified mechanism of whether a job is completed on time and to budget, means that suppliers now have a lot more power to be able to unlock liquidity and visibility of cash flows by basically self-designing the frequency in which they can deliver. So job cards can be tailor-made by suppliers, so long as the verification process is achieved. They can set a frequency of payments through an automated payment cycle facilitated by smart contracts, which could be daily, could be monthly, could be quarterly. And this is a huge burden for many suppliers, specifically in the construction industry, where cash flow is always a challenge. So yeah, I mean, just some of the kind of areas perhaps that could be interesting to the audience is, the whole world of ESG, which is essentially the kind of main mechanism for scoring companies' credibility when it comes to green status. is something that is evolving. There is actually no global standard to ESG reporting, and yet the entire fund management and capital markets industry is predicated on ESG scores. So it's kind of like a moving, a moving platform, this is problematic. So there's a lot of room for error when there's no uniformity or no agreed taxonomy in the world of capital markets. So ESG scoring means various things to various fund managers. And, what we've looked at is actually providing a streamlined way of aggregating as many scoring models together in a single methodology, but also applying specific investment theses coming from a fund manager to the scoring mechanisms, which is a very important condition, because many fund managers are really, really struggling about, essentially what is nirvana here, what is going to come out tops once, EU regulation comes through. And so we've got the ability to actually be highly flexible and create normalized, aggregated views of both conditions for fund managers in terms of how they want to invest and should invest, as well as, the kind of external drivers of ESG scoring. The other thing is we've applied ourselves to being able to scout and source valuable green projects globally using public data analysis, integrating with some highly sophisticated sourcing engines, rather than, the very physical manual work that many investors have to do in order to actually find essentially the project deal flow. And that's a huge thing because, as I said, many of the greater projects are actually not that visible because they're not listed on stock exchanges. They're not listed on indices. They're quite hard to come by, and they're in far-flung places of the world. The other challenge that is very real for the capital markets industry I think the industry is still coming to this realization that it's one thing being able to fund green projects as a one-off, but very often those projects require ongoing funding. In fact, 99% of them do. The ability to monitor in a living, breathing way the activity, the operational activity of the projects that they are funding, however removed they are actually from those projects, will become an increasing challenge. By being able to actually embed clever technology such as IoT, robotic, RPA, AI technology, all the buzzwords, sorry to say, but these are important mechanisms to actually bring the operations of physical supply chains to life, embedded onto blockchain, really do create a potentially huge level of transparency for investors that they've never had before. So again, technology is a major aid to the construction and real estate industry moving forward. And specifically from a sustainability perspective, where visibility and transparency of how these projects are maintaining their green standard is all critical. And then, already today in our first iteration of our use case in Norway, this particular engine has satisfied close to 500 retail investors, 30 corporate investors, and we have been able to, create very interesting financial instruments in a tokenized form, both debt and equity, based on a portfolio of projects, which is great because it's cut almost the access to in the investment costs almost taken completely off the table. But what's more exciting, of course, and for those blockchain fans on the call, you'll know that, the promise of tokenizing essentially in the illiquid asset class such as property, that fractionalization opportunity for investors means that more investors are able to participate and wealth create in something that may have not been possible before. And we've been right in the thick of seeing that come to life. So really, I think this is essentially my last or second to last slide, which really just brings to life the story that I've tried to impart with you, which is, the construction and real estate industry has a big role to play in our green world and the move to a low carbon economy, and technology plays a massive role in that. And it's symbiotic. The more we can work to bring quality capital to quality projects, the better for all of us. And technology such as blockchain is a perfect use case for doing that. And so our world has been focused specifically in this particular project called Glacia, where most of the work we've done has been in Scandinavia, looking at how mostly, emerging technologies such as blockchain, IoT and RPA stroke AI can be applied to the phases of the entire life cycle of construction and the construction supply chain process, unlocking value at a project level, and how that can be then provide greater scrutiny and greater visibility to investors, which again then feeds the life cycle. The more you can give confidence to investors, the more likely they are to want to invest in further projects, and those projects that are more visible will get more capital. So that is my delivery. I think I've just made it in time to take on any questions. If there are, I'd be delighted to answer them. Thank you. Okay, so the first question is from Faye. Thank you, Faye. So have you used or seen smart contracts used at scale in real estate? The honest answer is absolutely, no, not absolutely. The honest answer is I haven't seen it used at scale, but I've certainly been privy and very fortunate to be involved in 3 use cases which have the potential to scale very widely. And by that I mean these are complex supply chains with large suppliers, big names in the fold, combined with smaller, more bespoke players within the construction life cycle and real estate life cycle, which gives me a lot of hope. The kind of takeout for me, I think it's early days. As with anything, technology is never the issue. The biggest challenge we see is the adoptability of the traditional processes that suppliers, established suppliers would have in adopting the technology or morphing their processes, payment cycles, contracts, legal commitments, and ways of doing business with smart contract logic. But for those that have been progressive, the advantages and the benefits have definitely already been delivered. So hopefully that goes some way to answering Faye's question. And then Chris Holst has asked, have you incorporated risk management transparency into your platform? Well, I mean, that's a very big topic, and thank you for that question. I think one of the because our use cases are still fairly early days, they're kind of living, breathing. The one area of risk management that we've had to consider is, well, it's, simply by automating the certainly from a supply chain perspective, payment cycles, and the release of funding is theoretically a great thing, but human intervention is certainly something that is still very, very necessary at this stage. So our mandates have we provide the technology engine and basically the build, but our clients have provided the mechanisms to still provide on-site verification and ways in which the certain cycles can be intercepted with human intervention, human verification, tracking and auditing. I don't think we're quite there yet to kind of let the whole thing be automated. And then obviously when you look at the investment side and the investment management side of property, gosh, I mean, that's a whole different topic. We spent a huge amount looking at risk mitigation for investors. That's mostly because, that's mostly had to take the place of licensing constructs for tokenized and digital assets, which we spent some time at, and that's very much geographically bound. So hopefully that goes some way into answering that question, but it's a very big subject. So those are just two examples. And then Chris, your second question is, adopting technology has all to do with perceived risk, would you not say? Yeah, I mean, all to do with perceived risk. I mean, I would say adopting emerging technology, definitely. Innovative technology, definitely. We only pick mandates where we have brave people at the very top wanting to do brave things. And for sure, that assumes that there's a level of risk. Michael Martin, hi, thanks for your presentation. What is the link between your platform services and existing standards and norms such as WELL, LEED, BREEAM, etc. certifications? A great question. We ourselves are completely agnostic and accepting or adopting of the green certifications that are out there. Again, just like, so from a supply chain perspective, that's incredibly important. And however, our use case, our clients have wanted to, embed their kind of green standards. We've simply adopted those. So for example, in Norway, one of the standards we've had to work with in the construct of the construction industry there, sustainable construction industry there, is something called the Power Alliance, which is really a consortium of major suppliers coming together to deliver quality. But that kind of consortium has to work together for that green mechanism to hold true. But even, I must say, it's a funny debate, because even some of my Norwegian clients have actually felt that certainly LEED has not been strong enough for the quality standards that they want to impose. But it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see which of these certifications and thresholds apply, certainly across, major regions and jurisdictions. But for us, we're pretty agnostic. And I think I've tried to answer as many of those questions. I don't see any more. So yeah, hopefully I've done a good enough job there.